IHM Academy for EMS in 2019. Prior to his employment with Brentwood, Chris worked for the St. Louis Fire Department as an EMT for 3 years and the Shrewsbury Fire Department as a firefighter paramedic. Chris is also a graduate of St. John Vianney High School. Chris is assigned to B shift and is married to his wife, Paige. Tonight, Paige will be pinning his badge. Right, least but not last. Ed Burney. Ed has been involved with the fire service in the greater St. Louis area since 1980. He began his association as a volunteer firefighter with the St. Charles Fire Protection District in January 1980. His paid career began in July 1982 with the then Normandy Fire Protection District. During this time, he attended and graduated from the paramedic program at St. Louis University. In May of 1988, Ed accepted a position as a firefighter paramedic with the Metro West Fire Protection District. In his 33 years of service, he progressed upward through the ranks until his retirement as a deputy chief and was instrumental in the development of the battalion training and company officer development programs, increasing the capabilities of the technical rescue program, functioning as the accreditation manager to achieve international designation for the district, and design and delivery of the Blue Card Command Training Center and Emergency Operations Center. Throughout his long career, Ed always placed emphasis on professional development and education. He holds a Master's of Science degree in Executive Fire Service Leadership from Grand Canyon University and undergraduate degrees from the University of Cincinnati in Fire Science and Safety and Engineering Technology. He is a graduate of FEMA's Executive Fire Officer Program and the National Emergency Managers Advanced Academy. In addition, he holds designations as a credentialed Chief Fire Officer and Chief Training Officer from the Center for Public Safety Excellence Commission for Professional Credentialing. Ed continues to function as a team leader, peer assessor, and agency mentor to fire service agencies worldwide who are seeking accredited agency status. Ed also leads and facilitates courses through the Chapman Foundation of Caring Communities focusing on communication skills and empathetic listening. Assistant Chief Burney began his new role with the Brentwood Fire Department on June 14th. Ed and his wife Shannon have been married for 29 years. They live in Ellisville and have 3 adult daughters, Nicole, Madison, and Caroline. Tonight, Ed's wife Shannon will be pinning his badge. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Chief. Well, I want to congratulate the two to the promotion to the lieutenant, and welcome the 2 new, especially our new assistant fire chief. Welcome to the city of Brentwood. Next on the agenda, we have a public hearing, and with that, I will gavel open public hearing for case number 21-04, public hearing to consider the following: rezoning from PD Planned Development Overlay District to B Single-Family Residential for property located at 8817 Powell Avenue. If anybody in the audience cares to address or speak to this issue, now is the time to do so. All right. I will gavel close the public hearing for case number 2104. Thank you. Next up on the agenda is the approval of the agenda. I have one change, and that is I'm going to ask, since Alderman Plufka is unable to attend tonight because of an illness, that we move over to the next meeting bills 6333, 6334, and 6335. Do we have any other changes, any other modifications? With that, can we get any objection to approving the agenda by acclamation with that change? Seeing none, it will be so approved. Thank you. Next up then is on the agenda is citizens' comments. Anybody in the public care to address the board? Now is the time to do so. You will be given up to 3 minutes. And that includes, I think, as well, anybody who's phoning in. Is that correct, Kelly?
We have no one right now.
Okay, great. Thank you. All right. Well, then let's move on to mayor and alderman reports. Item 7. Under the mayor, I have no announcements. Brings us to Alderman Plufka. I think he has nothing. Alderwoman Tice.
No report.
Alderwoman Sims. Is your mic on?
I report now that my mic is on.
Okay.
I guess we have a Ways and Means committee meeting on July 1st, next Thursday. That's the only report.
Okay. Alderman Weggie.
Yeah, I, again, would like to thank public safety and our first responders for helping us put that speed hump on the Rosalie. It's been wildly popular with the residents there, and I think that's a very important thing for improving the safety of that block. So thank you all for doing that.
Great, thank you.
That's it.
Alderman Gould.
No report.
Alderman Lockmuller.
Public Safety will meet this coming Wednesday, the 23rd at 5:30, right here. Thank you.
Alderwoman O'Neill.
Yes, as library liaison, I want to make a quick announcement with more detail next time perhaps. But our library director, Jenna Gibbons, has been elected president of the consortium that we belong to. We're not part of the county library system. We have our own small consortium, and it's a 2-year term. She has some plans, and we're thrilled that she's taken on the responsibility.
Great, thank you. And Alderman Shelton.
No report.
All right, that brings us to the next item, which is item 8, City Administrator Report. We have 4 items under that. The first is the report from Kerber, Eck, and Breckel.
We have Gina Cochran on the line. She's joined. Oh, there she is. Is that her? Yeah, that's her.
Gina, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mayor and Board of Aldermen, for having me here tonight. Again, we're going, my name is Gina Cochran, and I'm a partner with KEB here in St. Louis to review the report on agreed upon procedures on the expenditures of the Certificate of Participation proceeds for the city for the first quarter of 2021. And that's in association with the Brentwood Bound Renewal Project. So our series of 2018 Certificate of Participation procedures covered request number 70 through 75. It included 61 invoices and invoices totaling about $3.8 million. Our step 1 is to compare those invoices to paid contracts approved by the Board of Aldermen to determine, and as detailed in our findings, there were no exceptions noted in reviewing those invoices in comparison to those contracts. Step 2 is to examine the invoices to determine that the city's policies and internal controls were followed. We did have a couple of exceptions that were noted. First being that there were capital forms were not completed prior to the disbursements for 32 of 61 invoices totaling $1.46 million. Those invoices did have properly approved check request forms, and all other cities' policies and internal controls were followed, with the exception of the one item that I will cover shortly. So those invoices were actually in 3 of the 6 requests, number 71, 75, and 1 invoice in request number 74. The only other exception that we did note was an exception whereby a $10,000 disbursement for earnest money deposit on a purchase of a property within that Brentwood Brown location, our project, was not placed on the warrant list that is typically approved by the finance director, reviewed by the city administrator, and then placed on the Board of Aldermen's agenda for approval. But again, all other policies and procedures were performed with the exception of that capital form not being completed on this specific item as well. And then step 3 is to review all of those invoices to ensure proper payment is allowed under the official statement of certificate of participation. And we had no exception for the 61 invoices that were reviewed. Also, our procedures cover the 2019 certificate of participation, but for that first quarter of 2021, there were no requests for that project fund, so no procedures were performed on requests for those.
Great, thank you. Anybody have any questions for Ms. Cochran on the report? Okay, well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next on the agenda is item 8B, Brentwood Bound update. I believe Craig Schluter is going to take that.
Good evening. Craig Schluter with Navigate Building Solutions. So before I go into my typical update, I'm going to start with the Manchester Road Improvements financial update. So this is a project that MoDOT is handling on behalf of Brentwood, and Brentwood approved a cost share agreement where there are certain stipulations in that agreement. So now that bids have been received by MoDOT, there's a financial reconciliation component that I wanted to go through with you all. So the MoDOT project, which is Manchester Road Improvements, has the cost share grant and the East-West Gateway STP grant. And as part of my Brentwood Bound update I've done for a while, I've had in the additional funding sources about $5 million is targeted for that. So this was never a grant that Brentwood just receives a check for $5 million. That total cost of that project just gets reduced by that grant amount for both the cost share and the East-West Gateway grant. So now that bids have been received, we can reconcile that. Since the bids have been received and they did come in higher than expected, MoDOT needs to wire MoDOT an additional $388,238.72 as shown on the warrant list. I've updated my typical Brentwood Bound City Administrator update to reflect this, and you'll see that the grant funds are no longer shown in the additional funding sources. In that yellow section, it's just a hyphen, which is a 0. But because of not all those grant funds were needed because the bids come in higher, the contingency went up by a significant amount since the last board meeting. So, where last meeting we were around $3.8 million in contingency, it's now showing that we've got $6.6 million in contingency. So that's how this whole financial reconciliation's kind of worked out. I have a table on my update so you can see the delta of where we hoped it would come in to where it is now. I also wanted to mention that we've talked about a risk with the MoDOT project is the property acquisitions. They're handling all the property acquisitions for Manchester Road improvements on behalf of Brentwood. That's something that's been going on for a long period of time. They've got about 10 properties left in negotiations, condemnations, mostly condemnations. And as we've learned with condemnations, we don't necessarily know the risk until the commissioner's award. And I've asked them to let us know what the potential exposure could be because, all of us want to know what that risk is. They believe that they're going to have all the property acquisitions done by end of September of this year, and they believe that the exposure to wrap up the property acquisition process could be up to $800,000. So beyond what I've reported today, there could be a potential $800,000 risk, and that's coming straight from MoDOT. So going to my typical update, starting with construction costs, total spent since the last Board of Alderman meeting is $1,639,493.71. Next is soft costs. Total spent since the last board meeting is $250,918.34, and that was on material testing, utility fees, flood mitigation, Grg Connector, Manchester Road improvements, event lawn, comfort station, and playground, design and engineering, project management fees, environmental consulting, real estate appraisals, surveying, and redevelopment consulting. Next is property acquisitions. $42,500 was spent since the last Board of Aldermen meeting on property acquisitions. As I mentioned, the contingency was increased because of that MoDOT financial reconciliation. Going to the categories of funding, the city did receive the first deposit from MSD for the MSD Hampton Creek project. I already talked about why the East-West Gateway MoDOT grant is now zeroed out. Brentwood received a payment from MoDOT for the Frederick Roofing easement, and that was in the amount of $54,000. So after all of this, the city still has over $11 million in contingency, really. And that's both in contingency and additional funding sources. So the city's in good shape in that category, but this was something that's been hanging out there for a while, and it's kind of reassuring to at least know where we stand on that project, because it's not something that we're not involved in on day-to-day. We have this agency that's really handling that on behalf of Brentwood.
Great, thank you. Any questions for Craig? Okay, thanks, Craig.
Thank you.
That brings us to item 8C, which is the presentation of the 95% Great Rivers Greenway Deer Creek Connector Project drawing design. Is Andy Frankie, I think, with PDS.
Members of the Board of Aldermen, thank you. It's nice to be back.
Yeah, nice to see you again,
It's
Andy.
good to see you guys. And wow, all the technology is working. I'm batting 1,000. With me tonight is Jeff Nilgis from Planning Design Studio. Jeff's in the back. If I do something really bad, he'll run up here and help me out. Also tonight, Phil Blond with Jacobs will be presenting a little bit about the intersection at Russell and Brentwood Boulevard. So tonight, we'd like to just give you an update on the Grg Connector. Our agenda is, and you guys can see that, right? Okay. Hi, Jack. Good to see you. There's really no formal board direction or resolutions required tonight, so breathe easy, take a break, and just listen. We're going to give you an overview of the 95% plan submittal. We're going to talk a little bit about the Union Pacific Railroad crossing and the Brazeau, Russell, Brentwood intersection, and then Craig's going to talk a little bit about the schedule and the budget. So that's kind of what's on tap. The next image, you may remember, this is the master plan for the Brentwood bound project. Manchester Road is at the top of the image. Hanley Road's on the right-hand side. On the left-hand side is Brentwood Boulevard. You can see the Union Pacific Railroad at the bottom. The red box is the Grg Connector Project, and if you remember that project, the goal of that project was to connect Rogers Greenway, which is right here, underneath the tunnel, all the way down to Deer Creek Greenway in this location. So that's what we're going to show you, the construction drawings for that project right now. This drawing looks pretty. The other drawings aren't so pretty, but they're going to get the job done, I can promise you that. This next image is a picture of all the properties that are involved in the Norm West Park site. Also on the left-hand side of the image, you can kind of see the second half of the project, which is the project along Brentwood Boulevard in front of Metro. So we've kind of sliced that up for you so it could all be on one sheet. You can see all the properties listed, so there are a lot of properties involved here. Next is the key map. We're going to kind of run through one series of sheets. They're the landscape sheets. We have 192 drawings. We didn't want to keep you guys all night on this, but we're going to kind of start at the top at Manchester Road and work our way through the grid. So that's what we're going to do. Before we do that, we wanted to pull out a drawing from the tunnel project that Craig talked about. This is the landscape plan for the tunnel. And you can see, again, north is up on all of these sheets. You can see the south underpass as it leaves the tunnel and where it's going to connect up to the Grg trail. And you'll notice, and I think you've seen this in the past, the path actually splits in half. We do that on both sides of the tunnel so that when people approach that, they slow down. It kind of gives them a visual cue, hey, a tunnel's coming up, don't go cranking through here, you might hurt yourself or somebody else. So that's what the landscape plan looks like for that, and we're going to connect up. Our project's going to begin kind of down in this area. This is the first sheet in the set of drawings for the landscape plans. We felt these were good sheets because they showed planting and everything kind of all together. I'll call your attention to the key plan. It's got a little gray square. You're going to see that box kind of move around. We're going to kind of go through the grid here. But as we start the project from the north and go south, you can see our 12-foot wide concrete trail. And you can also see the reconstructed parking lot at 8702 Manchester Road. That's part of the project. And again, just to refresh everybody's memory, Mary Avenue kind of terminates into this parking lot, and there'll also be an access drive across the trail for MSD's access into the 3S structure. This is an enlargement of that parking lot, 48702 Manchester Road. It includes kind of overlaying about half of the parking lot. We have a relocated dumpster with an enclosure in the south part of the project and an ornamental fence to provide a barrier from the parking lot as well. Moving on down the road, you can see that the 12-foot wide trail begin to snake its way down towards the end of the project. You will also notice the Phase 1 trail connects in, and the Phase 1 trail is a trail that's being built along Deer Creek as it goes in an east direction. It'll connect all the way up to the Phase 2 project and then loop back up to Manchester Road to that shared use path that runs along the south side of Manchester Road. So it'll make a nice little loop trail. This is the MSD 3S Diversion Facility. Sounds pretty imposing. It's really a giant slab of concrete with a bunch of manholes on it as well. One of the other things to notice is we've got a secondary concrete, 6-foot wide concrete sidewalk that's going to wind its way around and go to the edge of the Mary Avenue storage basin, and that's shown on the bottom of the plan, this location. That pond has a forebay. You see this pipe kind of sticking out. You won't see that it's underneath the water line, and it's taking a lot of storm water, but the idea is the forebay is going to capture a lot of silt and debris, and it's going to settle out so that it doesn't silt into the rest of the pond. You'll also notice the boardwalk that's skirting the edge along that Mary Avenue storage basin as well. Kind of moving across the grid, you can see our 12-foot wide trails, again, moving south. You can see the amphitheater. The stage of the amphitheater is kind of bounded by a retaining wall in the pond, so we'll have some nice views as you're looking out over the stage over the water. And you can also see that secondary 6-foot sidewalk in that area as well. Again, now we're in the kind of the third grid row here. You can see the Mary Avenue storage basin at the top, that sidewalk curving along as well. And you can see our meditation lawn, and I apologize, a couple slides before you probably saw, and I can kind of move back there. You saw also, I skipped over this, our first meditation lawn. We have 3 meditation lawns. They're kind of more of a passive space where if people want to kind of get together or have a more private experience in the park, they can do that. So there's 3 of those in the park as well. This is the second meditation lawn. Continuing on across the grid, you can see the connector trail continue its journey south. One of the other things that everybody's really interested in, we got a soccer field. We got notice very late in our submittal that the soccer field was going to change to the destination playground site. So that's going to be removed on our final submittal, and this will be the site for the future destination playground. As the path moves along, you can see it kind of goes by this driveway that moves in an east-west direction. That's the MSD diversion facility that's out there today. If you've been on the site, you kind of see a block building. That's that as well. And what we're doing with that is we're allowing, we're mandated by MSD to keep a driveway through there. And on the previous sheet, you'll notice this MSD grass paved area. That's a connection so MSD can get some of their vehicles back into the horseshoe sewer that's along the creek so they can maintain their facilities back there. You'll also notice as the path continues south that it begins to touch on the event lawn building site as well, and there'll be eventually a sidewalk that connects, that kind of splits off and connects to the destination playground. This is a sheet as we're kind of continuing on the west that just shows that destination playground site. As the trail continues to move south, it turns and heads west along the bottom of the event lawn building site. Again, that's a different project, so we're kind of showing that on our drawings as just a blank space. The next slide shows the permeable parking lot with 66 spaces that'll serve the event lawn and the destination playground. The trail goes through a plaza with benches, and then it continues, it skirts a rain garden that's providing some treatment of stormwater from the parking lot. And then you'll also notice that Brazeau Avenue is an extension, and it's starting its curve where it's eventually going to meet up with Brentwood Boulevard. And that's this sheet right here as we continue west. One of the things here, you can kind of see the intersection that Phil's going to talk about in a little bit. You can see our trail continues, and then it's going to veer south as it heads along Brentwood Boulevard. One thing to note, and we'll talk about a little bit more about this in detail, is we have a park sign that's sign panels, and I'll explain that in a little bit, that kind of forms a visual barrier as people are kind of congregating to make this turn or decide if they're going to go across the street. And it'll have some signage on it. As the trail turns and goes over the Union Pacific Railroad, we've labeled drop arms. As we're in negotiations with the Union Pacific, those might actually turn into what are called bucks, which are just lights and bells, and we won't have the drop arm. Because of the nature of that rail line, we don't, Union Pacific doesn't think that we're gonna need drop arms. Trail will continue south, it'll go across Metro's northernmost entrance, and then it'll continue along Brentwood Boulevard in front of the parking lot. You can see that here. Then it'll actually cross across Metro South entrance, which will be signalized. And as part of the expansion or the adjustments to Metro's parking lot, we also have a small expanded parking lot on the south side of that entrance drive. The trail will continue south. It'll kind of make a veer with a little bulb out where there's some planting in there. The idea behind that is to provide some more buffer between Brentwood Boulevard there. Then the trail will go on top of the existing Deer Creek Bridge. That'll have about a 10 or 11 foot expansion kind of attached to it. We're gonna have a total of about 15, almost 16 feet on top of that bridge. And we kind of cut and splice that. You can see it'll eventually come over there, and then it'll turn into kind of a three-way configuration where if you want to continue on the Deer Creek Greenway, you'll just loop on the outside and go. Or if you want to go towards the park, you can kind of cross over at Marshall and get onto that. So that's kind of very quickly what the project's shaping up to be. I wanted to talk a little bit about the signage wall that we talked about earlier. This is a panel of 28 perforated metal panels that are sandwiched together into 14 panel assemblies. The panel will look like the perforated metal panels that are already been built at the Ameren substation just south of the Metro building. There'll be a light in the top of each of those panels, and it'll glow through the perforations as well. So this is, in effect, a sign wall and a screen wall, so it's doing double duty. On the end where the sidewalk is, and you can see the lady that we've drawn in there, there'll be some wayfinding signage to direct people to different parks, whether you're looking south or north. This is an elevation. If you were headed northbound and you'd already crossed the railroad tracks and you're about ready to make the turn into the park, so this is what you'd see. Now, I know you guys are talking about the name Norm West Park. We have plenty of room to expand that if we need. One of the other things that's really kind of cool that you'll notice along Brentwood Boulevard is we're actually proposing to paint the traffic barrier between the bridge and the traffic lanes. GRG's done this a lot. If you've been down kind of near the Shrewsbury station, they've put a lot of signage on that. We weren't kind of going completely that way with our logo, but on the traffic side, because we're dealing with St. Louis County highways, they were a little bit concerned about having a lot of visual clutter and the people would just stare at the bridge and crash. So what we did is we're gonna just paint that green and put a smaller GRG logo on one end of it. On the pedestrian side of it, we're gonna paint that with multiple colors and put some labels on the inside so when people are walking, it feels a little bit nicer than just a plain concrete wall. So that's kind of a quick overview of the projects as it stands. Next, I'm gonna let Phil kind of take over and talk a little bit about the intersection right at Brentwood Boulevard and Russell and Brazeau.
All right, sure. Good evening, everybody. This is an aerial view of what exists in that area now. You see Brentwood Material. It's a business that is in the process of relocating, and so what you see there will be demolished and replaced with the new Brazeau Avenue extension that'll serve as the main entrance to the park. So that will, you notice in the area that's right adjacent to the Union Pacific Railroad spur crossing of Brentwood Boulevard. So the creation of that intersection right next to the railroad crossing, that sparks some coordination between St. Louis County, Missouri Department of Transportation that oversees the railroad safety for the state, and the Union Pacific Railroad. And GRG has also been involved because the trail that's proposed for the area. So that's what it looks like today. And if we go to the next slide here, here's the same location in our proposed plans. You see the new, at the top, Brazeau Avenue makes this a four-way intersection. We were able to work with St. Louis County and get approval for a traffic signal at that intersection. There's an existing traffic signal. You'll see it a little bit to the right, to the south of the railroad track crossing. There's an entrance to the north entrance to Bi-State, one of two entrances to the Bi-State Metro facility. Currently, there's a traffic signal there, and buses primarily go both in and out of that entrance. So, in order to get approval for the traffic signal on the north side, the city worked with, and the design team worked with Bi-State and Metro and got their permission to remove the traffic signal for the north entrance and then allow the traffic signal to be placed, new traffic signals to be installed north of the railroad crossing. The Bi-State north entrance will be converted to a right-only, out-only movement. So you see that curvature of that will become an exit only onto northbound Brentwood for the buses. So the improvements, this came at a good time actually, because MoDOT had a separate project that they were planning simply to improve the safety of the railroad crossing. So this allowed the city to partner with MoDOT. So they're putting together all these improvements planned and designed together. So the traffic signal will be preempted by the new railroad signals. If you saw there on this previous slide, there's no controls at that railroad crossing currently. Now, it doesn't get a whole lot of rail traffic, and there have not been any incidents. The railroad has records going back a long time. Fortunately, there haven't been any accidents there, but MoDOT, in planning this project, they've told us that they do get reports of a number of close calls from time to time. So that railroad crossing will be getting gates and cantilevered flashing railroad warning devices, and they will be connected with, the railroad signals will be connected to the new traffic signal for the four-way intersection. So the signals will normally work. You'll have a cycle where you have the left turns from northbound Brentwood onto Russell, from southbound Brentwood onto Brazeau. That would get a cycle. And then following that, there'd be an all green for Brentwood. And then following that, there'd be an all red for Brentwood and green for the Brazeau and Russell for the smaller streets. That would be, so it'll be, have detection so that the side streets would only get green if cars were actually there to trigger that, or if a pedestrian hits the walk signal, then there'd be a longer green cycle for the small streets. So that's how it would work with there's no train. If a train comes, the gates will activate and everything at the traffic intersection will go red, with the exception of northbound Brentwood would go green for a short amount of time, so that any traffic that was on the tracks or just right on the tracks or just between the tracks and the intersection would still be able to clear the intersection and get out of the way. But then it would go red. And the trains operate here at fairly slow speeds, and they would actually have, the railroad will have the operating so that the train will come to a stop before continuing to cross. So all this procedures has been planned. It should greatly improve the safety of this area. And as Andy said, there will not be gates on the trail, but they will have the crossbucks with flashing lights and bells warning that the train is coming. So this is the same area. This is the next one here. I want to get to the south entrance to Bi-State. So because we reconfigured, our plan is to reconfigure the north entrance, we have to reconfigure the south entrance to allow for bus movement into the facility there, because all the buses will now be entering the facility there, so that's a change for their operations, and so a widening of the entrance for the south and adjustments to the traffic signals at that location are also part of the project. As you can see, the GRG trail goes through the area. Prior to this improvements for the roadway, the trail itself required some adjustments to the bi-state parking lot. But then once this railroad signal was put in, there's additional adjustments required. The primary reason for that, as you can see, the project adds a median in Brentwood Boulevard right near the railroad tracks in order to, so that the gates, so that the posts supporting the gates have a place to stand. All right, so I think that covers the improvements along Brentwood Boulevard, and I think I'll turn it back to Andy to complete the presentation.
Appreciate it. So as we continue to develop the plan, we're going to split this project into two different bid packages. Everything shown in blue is going to be the Norm West Park bid package, which some people are starting to call Phase 3. And then the stretch along Brentwood Boulevard is going to be the Brentwood Boulevard Phase 4 package. As part of that, we're developing a list of alternates, because in this bidding climate, we want to have maximum flexibility on projects. It's my wife told me, boy, you have a lot of gray hair, a lot more than when we had two girls. And I said, it's the bidding climate, I'll tell you. But so we're going to have 11 alternates on that, on our first Norm West Park package. First one will be park irrigation. Second will be enhanced landscape. Third will be a deduct alternate to use a cheaper Versalock material retaining wall. Remember that 3S structure, we have an alternate to provide some fencing around it. It's really just a concrete pad, but still, if we want a fence to keep people away from it, we've got an alternate to do that. Also have an alternate to try and soften it up with some landscaping. Like all the other projects we've bid, there's been establishment maintenance. We're gonna do those as alternates for year 2 and 3. Base bid, we'll have 1 year as the base bid. The sign wall we showed you will be an alternate as well. The boardwalk will be an alternate. The seating area of the amphitheater will be an alternate. And providing and installing site furnishings will be an alternate too. So that's the way that's shaping up right now. As we know, on the Brentwood Boulevard package, we have one alternate, and that's bridge deck topping. And the idea behind that is, since we're essentially kind of attaching a bridge extension onto it, there's usually a joint or a crack. And usually, I mean, most times you can get that pretty tight. But with people using a lot of bicycles and rollerbladers, we wanted to have the option to put one complete continuous surface around on that, so that it would be nice and smooth. So those are kind of how the alternates are shaping up. And I think with that, I'm going to turn it over to Craig to talk about the schedule and budget.
Great. So to add some more color to why we're breaking up the bid packages, the city was awarded the East-West Gateway STP grant for Brentwood Boulevard going down Russell back in March. So that's another one of those grants. And Dan and I had a call with East-West Gateway and MoDOT last week, and they said that they needed that project to be one bid package, going up Brentwood Boulevard and going across Russell. So that's a requirement of the grant that we just learned about. So it works out okay, because we just released TWM, you approved their contract the last board meeting to start the Russell Trail. But that, along with just making sure the Union Pacific process gets wrapped up and the agreements get done, it made sense to break that out, not only because we want to get those agreements done, but also as a grant stipulation that we just learned about. So that's why those are getting broken out. We also, the Norm West Park, since that design's essentially done, we don't want to hold that up. You know, we've got the event lawn building that's going out to bid soon. We've got flood mitigation all working through there. So we want to make sure we keep Norm West Park on track. There's no reason to have that weight on this other component, which can easily bid out separately. So Phase 3, like Annie talked about, it's the Grg Connector part of the project. That's in Norm West Park. We're targeting going out to bid July 13th. That's a push to get there, but we're really trying to achieve that date. That would allow us to take bids on August 5th. We would bring those bids to you all on August 16th. And that would allow construction to start August 17th, which would still allow that whole part of the project to be wrapped up end of '22. Phase 4, which again is that part of the trail that goes along Brentwood Boulevard across Russell, that would go out to bid winter of '22. And then construction would start spring of '22 and be wrapped up by end of next year as well. The current estimate, which doesn't include Russell Trail, that's always been a whole nother project that's never been factored in these budgets. You got $1 million to that part of the project, but TWM literally hasn't put any pencil to paper, so we need to start design and then we can estimate it. It is roughly $5.1 million. The budget we've been carrying is a little over $5.1 million. Pop up here, there we go. So we're about $40,000 under budget for just that base bid. So just to add some more color to this, there were some alternates that were new. The boardwalk, the amphitheater, those were originally in the project. So technically we're over budget if we included some of those alternates. But what's important for us in this current bidding environment that Annie talked about and that we've all lived together where the material costs are going up, our bids are coming in higher, is to pull some things out and have them as alternates because those are options. We get competitive bids and then staff can make recommendations and you all can decide what to do. Because what we are trying really hard to do in this current environment is not just bring a project to you again that's $1 million over budget. So let's at least do the best we can in an environment that we can't control to value engineer the project, look for ways to save money, but also have alternates for certain parts of the project that are easy to kind of piecemeal. And that way on bid day, we can see where the bids come in. And maybe you all decide to do the boardwalk or the amphitheater years later, you know, but at least you have the option. So that's why we're doing what we're doing, because this is an uncontrollable environment that is really an unprecedented time with material costs. So we're doing our best to at least help you guys and guide you guys to make decisions that are fiscally responsible for this city. So that's currently where that's all at. And I think, Annie, this is the end of the presentation. So if you guys have any questions on design or anything, the team can take it over.
Alderwoman Tice?
I have a question on what Phil was presenting about with the railroad crossings coming down and then the concrete going in the middle of Brentwood Boulevard. When's that going to happen? How is that count? I guess is the county doing that? Is Union Pacific doing that? And then how is that being coordinated with what we're doing?
So it's part the Union Pacific will be doing the installation of the gates and lights, those structures, and the replacement of the pavement sections that include the tracks themselves, as well as the controls. They'll be building a small building, a bungalow for the signal controls that will be placed on their right-of-way that will be connected to the gates and lights for the railroad, and that system will also be connected to talk to the traffic signal when it's for the preemption. So that work will be performed by Union Pacific Railroad, but the rest of the work will be performed by the city's contractor. But there's a cost-sharing agreement that Craig can probably get into a little more detail of it, but roughly the city will be paying about 10% of the overall set of improvements, with the balance paid for by some of the other parties.
And do you know the timing of when Union,
Oh,
I'm just kind of concerned, how much, there's so much traffic often on that leg of Brentwood Boulevard.
So summer and fall of 2022 is when those replacements, when that work would happen.
And do we know what the railroad's doing?
It will probably follow closely behind the rest of the roadway improvements. So there may be some small amount of time when the railroad controls aren't up yet while the other ones are being installed, but those details will all be worked out.
Thank you.
Staged. Yep.
Oh, I'm sorry, Alderman Gould.
Craig, when you're talking about the alternates, we're still designing into the plans.
Correct.
All of those, so that if we end up saying, okay, in a couple of years, we want to go ahead and add those elements that we might hold off on, there wouldn't be any additional design cost, right?
Correct.
It's just a bid package and,
Yeah, all these are in the project.
Okay.
And I think everyone would love to see all these accepted, just give
Absolutely.
you guys the options.
yep. All right, thank you.
Alderman Weggie.
Yeah, thanks for the explanation on the alternates. I was confused about that, so I think that's a great approach. On the parking lot, so you showed 66 spots. What happens if we determine somewhere soon that we need more parking space? You know, it seems like with the destination playground, with I think it was sheet 2, with the event lawn and everything, it seems like that's still an open question to us of how much parking are we going to need there, and what happens if we need more than the 66? It might be 96. I don't know.
It's 66. Your eyes are good. On this site, we really don't have any room to expand this parking lot. We're going to have to look at other locations. I think the design team has kind of informally kicked around, at least Jeff and I have, maybe looking kind of on the sort of towards the north, and we're just kind of spitballing some stuff. But on the property that the city's purchased, I think it's Church of God and stuff over here, is to maybe develop that as a supplemental parking lot right now, so that and then you can at least get people on the trail and park there. When you go to redevelop the project, maybe you put the condition on the developer that he has to include that parking in his development as public parking for it, because we're really landlocked. I mean, when you look at this thing, it would be nice if we could have got a shared parking agreement at 8702, but that just wasn't in the works. Really difficult to put anything on Brazeau because it's so narrow. So this is kind of one option that we did see. So we really can't expand that project to the existing parking lot to the north at all. We're really landlocked all the way in there.
Okay, and then the permeable pavement, I think that's great. What is the current state of the art for permeable pavement? My only experience is like the Cortex parking lot, which is kind of rough gravel. Is that still what permeable parking lots look like?
No, it'll be pavers. It'll actually be concrete pavers, and they have what's called trap rock, which is kind of purple rock in between the joints. Still ADA compliant, and it's actually it'll be really nice because it'll feel kind of like a paved plaza. So if you wanted to do some special events in there, I think when we were developing this concept a while ago, we were thinking that maybe some events or food trucks could go in there. So that's what it'll look like. It'll be a nice looking parking lot.
Okay, so that doesn't require like vacuuming out the
It does
pores
require some annual maintenance for vacuuming, but right now there's actually a lot of people out there that offer that as a service, so the city doesn't have to buy a vac truck. You can just pay somebody to do that.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Any other questions for Craig on this item? Or Andy or Phil? No? Okay, great, thank you.
You're welcome, thank you.
That brings us to the last item under the city administrative report, and that is the renaming of the Norm West Park. And I think the person who's going to present on that is Eric Grunfelder, Director of Parks and Recreation.
Thank you, and good evening. So at the last board meeting, the board approved a motion to direct staff to begin development of a process for renaming Norm West Park. The memo that's provided just kind of listed a couple options. I'll go through them pretty quickly. The first is to do an RFQ for a marketing or branding agency, which would assist staff with going through the process of how to figure out how to rename a park. The second that was discussed, which was a resident comprised task force, much like Brentwood Bound. It can be comprised of residents, an alderman, automatic representative, and as well as staff liaison, who could then, again, the staff and automatic liaison could lead that process as well. The third is doing both of those concurrently, so put out the RFQ while we're putting together the task force, and that way the agency would lead, the branding agency would lead the task force through the process. The last is something that staff kind of kicked around, and we thought might be at least worthwhile to bring forward. Obviously, we've talked about how this park will become kind of our premier park in the city of Brentwood. And we felt that the name should have a strong immediate connection to the city, celebrating the success of the Brentwood Bound project and showcasing the city for many years to come. It's an opportunity to link the park's name to the location, especially next to the redevelopment area. So as people come down there, they'll see the park as well. And so we really think it should have a strong Brentwood name. And so one of the options that we kicked around is just naming it Brentwood Park. Think the Pear Park, Creve Coeur Park, Fenton Park, and that would really basically create the city brand on this beautiful new park. To do that, we'd have to do something with Brentwood Park, and you could do the Brentwood Athletic Complex or Brentwood Sports Complex, one or the other, and then it kind of becomes more accurate of what that park's usage actually is. So there's just a couple options we threw out, and we're looking forward to the board's direction.
Do we need action by the board tonight on this?
Well, we've been given an October deadline, so in order for staff to move forward, we thought we would get direction unless the board would like to send that back to Public Works Committee.
Okay. Does anybody care to make, I guess, Alderman Weggie?
Yeah, I mean, I really like the Brentwood Park idea. I think that's fantastic, and I'm glad you're thinking that, and I appreciate you adding that. But I think the best path forward is to reconstitute the citizen committee. I'm not sure we need to go out for professionals on this. I think we could handle this with our residents, get their input, spend a couple months and get some ideas and let them come back with a recommendation. And maybe that recommendation would be the Brentwood Park recommendation, right? If we decided to do that. So my motion would be to take option 2, I believe, which is to reconstitute a citizen-led group with the recommendation to come back to Public Works.
For the making up of that, or how would we put that
It's
task?
already made up unless you
Okay.
want to add to it.
Yeah, I would say just reconstitute the Brentwood Bound
Brentwood
Task
Bound
Force
Task
That's the group.
and use that group again. And,
Okay.
And use that process.
Okay, so that's your motion?
Yep.
Okay. Anybody care to second that? All right, we've got a second by Alderman O'Neill. Any discussion on that? Alderwoman Tice?
Are there additional residents we might want to add to that committee? That committee was created before I joined the board, but there might be some people in the city with expertise in this area who we would want to add to renaming or the discussion about branding.
Turn on your-
I know of one resident who is leaving the area, so she couldn't do it either. So a few new faces would be fine.
I mean, is it a formal committee that, requires, or is it just kind of a group of people that we?
I don't think it's a formal committee. The members were made up of people that the mayor recommended, people that some of the aldermen recommended, people that I knew that had expressed interest in the Brentwood Bound project, during the budget process. So certainly if you have other individuals that you would like to serve, if you provide us their names, we'll get in touch with them.
That answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Alderman O'Neill?
Can they also consider renaming the current park? I like the sports complex idea a lot. I think it's always been confusing for Brentwood High students who are playing games down there, where exactly are they going? Having the sports complex name would make it a lot better distinguished from anything else. So maybe that could be part of the directions for the committee.
We have 2 assignments.
Alderman Gould, do you have your hand up?
Yeah, I mean, I would agree. I think that in this case, with some expertise that we have, we could probably handle some of the naming. I do think that the board or the staff should consider, if we're going to do an RFQ, maybe it's something that's bigger about just Brentwood branding altogether. So I think, specifically for the park, I like the idea of having it be kind of re-engaged and almost a final acknowledgement of the task force that helped us get to the place where we are. So
Is there an alderman on that committee?
I think I might have been before I was an alderman. I'm happy to continue on that if that's.
Okay,
I don't think so.
Okay.
I think you're right.
okay. So,
An alderman to be like Alderman Weggie.
Nominate Jeff Gould.
okay. All right, so we're going to keep this very simple. So what we have in front of us is a motion, essentially go with option 2, that is to reconstitute the Brentwood Bound Task Force and task them with the job of coming back with renaming Norm West Park and bring that recommendation back to Public Works, hopefully by August Public Works meeting. But, okay. So that's the motion on the table. We've had discussion. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, the motion carries. All right, great. Thanks, Eric. That brings us to item 9, the consent agenda. We have quite a few items on that. I think we have one request Alderwoman O'Neill would like to remove from that to have a discussion, and that is item I, Resolution 1298. So we're going to pull that from the consent agenda. Do we have any other questions about any of the remaining?
Is that, that's not the paving.
Oh, I'm sorry, you're right.
K.
K. No. Yes. K. It's item K, resolution number 1300. We're going to pull off the consent agenda, but we will leave everything else on the consent agenda unless somebody has any questions or requests for those remaining items. Alderman Gould.
Yeah, I did have one question about the annual liquor license renewal. Are we just approving the ones that have renewed so far, and then we're expecting those others to?
Absolutely.
Okay, because there's quite a bit of big list that,
Right.
okay.
Alderman Tice.
Could I ask a question about 9G, the maintenance of the storm water
Sure.
planting? Do we have an estimate, I guess this is maybe for Eric, do we have an estimate about what the annual cost of that will be and how much maintenance those are required for those?
The maintenance we would have been doing anyway because we were planning on putting in that rain garden. Just MSD to formalize the permitting process wants to codify the agreement. So while I don't have exact costs, it's going to be in the O&M manual, and we feel confident that we'll be able to handle everything.
Okay, great, thank you.
Thank you.
Alderwoman Sims.
Just to the liquor licenses, will I just get a phone call, to sign them?
Yes.
Okay.
We'll email them to you or
Okay.
something.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Thank you.
Okay. With that, Alderman Lockmuller,
Consent agenda.
as amended by removing item K.
Second.
All right, we've got a motion by Alderman Lockmuller, seconded by Alderwoman Tice, I believe. Any further discussion? Seeing none. Roll call, please, Kelly.
Alderwoman Tice.
Yes?
Alderwoman Sims.
Yes.
Alderman Weggie.
Yes.
Alderman Gould.
Yes.
Alderman Lockmiller.
Yes.
Alderwoman O'Neill.
Yes.
Alderman Shelton.
Yes.
Item is approved.
Great, thank you. And so we will move resolution number 1300 to new business. So please don't let me forget to do that. So that brings us to the new business. And bear with me here, I lost my screen. And the first item under new business is item, we have no old business, so new business, item 11A, and that is bill number 6327. Can we get a first reading by title only, please, Mr. City Attorney?
Bill number 6327, an ordinance to rezone certain property numbered 8817 Powell Avenue from PD Plan Development Overlay District to B Single-Family Residential District. First reading.
Great, thank you. And who's presenting on that? Is that going to be Adam Jones? Is that John?
John B.
Hello, John.
Hello. As you probably know from your report, this is the proposed rezoning to be residential of the lots of the lot that is just west of the corner at Powell and Brentwood. This was before the Planning and Zoning Commission back in May, I believe. And it involves a residential property proposed to be split into two lots. And it is in the PD district now. And in order to do what is being requested and to split the lot accordingly, it would have to go to the B single-family district. What this does is, of course, you would be violating your comp plan in terms of what its recommendations are, which is the 350 feet setback from Brentwood that was intended, at least as part of the extensive discussions that went on there, to protect the viability of Brentwood as a future commercial corridor and create opportunities for fronting property to acquire property behind it, and in effect being encouraged by the zoning that was put into place. This situation, as I pointed out, doesn't comport with your comp plan. The Planning and Zoning Commission recommended denial. This is a somewhat unusual situation relative to the fact that there is a very nice house that sits on the frontage at Brentwood, and it's one of the few that's still left along there. So if you contemplate the alternate here, which would be to allow this subdivision and rezoning, the question becomes, what do you do to the potential value of that house as commercial property? Because obviously, going forward, its value as residential property may be not as good, except to those people who obviously love that house very much. So, I mean, I think it's a double-edged sword, and when I reviewed this with Lisa before she left, I believe the original conclusion from the commission's the right conclusion.
Okay, thank you. And just for the board's sake, with that having maybe this might be directed to the city attorney, so we had a 6-0 vote to deny essentially a positive recommendation. They didn't come to the board with a positive recommendation on this. It was the opposite of that. With that being the case, for the board to I guess essentially overrule or reject that recommendation, is there a certain number of votes that's needed for that, or is a simple majority still sufficient, if you know?
Yeah, I checked the code today because I sort of anticipated that question, and I did not find an automatic supermajority.
Okay.
With it to overturn that recommendation. It is just that, a recommendation.
Great, thank you.
Putting on my non-lawyer hat, I looked at the same thing.
Okay, well, we were all thinking the same thing then, that's always good. So any questions? We have one from Alderman Lockmuller.
John, so you're saying that the house that borders Brentwood.
It's what it looks like to me, and it is a very, very well-maintained one. Yes.
Houses are, single-family home
Yeah, the lot size doesn't match. When you split it, you can't match up to the PD regs for lot area. Anybody can apply to the Board of Adjustment for many things, then that they could. I don't know. The applicant here?
Okay. Anybody else have any questions for John? All right, Alderman Gould.
I do. Just a question on the clarity on the P and Z decision. Was that decision that they felt it should be denied because of the way the code or the comp plan's written? Or because of the way the comp plan's written, they want the board to weigh in on whether or not it should be adjusted?
Well, I wasn't obviously at the meeting, but based on the discussion I had with Lisa, they apparently felt fairly strong about maintaining the commercial
PD
depth,
status.
if you will,
Mhm.
that the plan dictates for the purpose of the future of that corridor. You know, Brentwood has a whole variety of land uses, some of which are in buildings that aren't contemporary commercial buildings. And if you don't provide for them to get better somehow or another, that's how the commission came to their conclusion. And I don't disagree with it.
Okay, I mean, it's definitely a very odd little tract of land there that, you know, because of the limits of the two streets widthwise along Brentwood, it's already limited right now with what you can commercially do with it, correct?
Unless you, I mean, again, and the only way to describe this is hypothetical. If those people that own that house that faces Brentwood want to sell today, their value is probably greater for commercial use, but that piece of property would need something behind it in order for you to be getting the kind of commercial use this board and I think the planning commission would want to see.
So to Alderman Lockmiller's point, though, you would have to, that person would then have to buy probably 2 residential properties behind them in order to actually do something developable.
And that's true anywhere up and down Brentwood in any number of places, which was the idea of the zoning in the first place.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Alderman Lockmiller.
I watched the P and Z and
The
kind of look at our trend, I voted for the comp plan. But I don't see it going there. I don't think we're ever going to take what the vision is,
and you're just very well describing the flip side argument. I don't know the other cases you're talking about. In this particular instance, however, the new houses that would be built there, presumably, are going to face commercial property because of what's across the street on Powell. So at the end of the day, the other question is what kind of house do you get? This is not an easy scenario.
Okay. Anybody else? I mean, we're not voting on this tonight. We'll be voting on this in July.
Your microphone.
Oh, nope, sorry.
Well, we won't disregard everything that Alderman Lockmuller just said, but you can trust me it was very well thought out, and it was a terrific comment. So we're not going to be voting on this tonight. We'll be voting on this at the next meeting. So thank you, John, which brings us to the next item, which is Bill number 6328. And just a little intro. The next 4 items, staff is requesting a first and second read on all 4 of these, just a little heads up. So we'll go through that process, and you can decide if you want to do that or not. So the first being Bill number 6328. Can we get a first reading of Bill 6328 by title only, please, Mr. City Attorney?
Bill number 6328, an ordinance granting site development approval, plan approval to Meridian Medical Technologies for development of a modular building addition at 2555 Hermann Drive, first reading.
Thank you. John, you're taking this one also?
While I'm up here.
Okay.
This is a, an addition to the Meridian Medical Development. It meets the site design issues. It's gone through all of the review processes, and it also meets the floodplain criteria for this particular location. If you're familiar with it, it's in one of those problem areas, but they've solved how you can do that. And so, because this has had approvals across the board and review, not only by the commission, but by all the code inspection and public works, I assume that I've heard nothing further to suggest that this isn't appropriate for approval.
Do we have any questions for John on this? Okay, and as we mentioned, we'd like to have a second read on this also. So can we get a motion for a second read on Bill 6328?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, we've got a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carries. Okay, Mr. City Attorney, can we get a second read on Bill 6328 by title only, please?
Bill number 6328, an ordinance granting site development plan approval to Meridian Medical Technologies for development of a modular building addition at 2555 Hermann Drive, second reading.
Great. Can we get a motion to perfect Bill 6328 into ordinance form?
Second.
Motion to perfect by Alderman Lockmiller, seconded by Alderman Weggie. Any further discussion? Roll call, please, Kelly.
Alderwoman Tice,
Yes.
Alderwoman Sims,
Yes.
Alderman Weggie,
Yes.
Alderman Gould,
Yes.
Alderman Lockmiller,
Yes.
Alderwoman O'Neill,
Yes.
Alderman Shelton.
Yes.
Motion to perfect bill into ordinance form has passed, and the ordinance number will be 4965.
Great, thank you. Next on the agenda is Bill number 6329. Can we get a first reading by title only, Mr. City Attorney?
Bill number 6329, an ordinance vacating certain right-of-way owned by the city which is no longer necessary for the purposes for which it was dedicated, first reading.
Great, thank you. John, while you're still up there, if you would.
Yes. This is the vacation and site design review, easement vacation for an easement, a city easement that's no longer necessary, but it also rolled into the site circulation and the site design aspects of that particular development by the school district. There were some, and it went through a traffic engineering review. There were some trade-offs with respect to some of the site design issues that I think made, at the end of the day, for a better site plan and a better circulation plan. And so this reflects everything as it went through the commission and went through that, as it went through that process and was recommended by the commission.
Great, thank you. Any questions for John on that? Yeah, Alderman Weggie.
One clarification. So it says property reverts and who shall execute the deed of vacation. That's just a way of saying that all costs of like moving this over is on the school, correct?
Well, reversion means that the title to the property would return to the city if it's not used as was anticipated.
Right.
So you get the property back.
But
Cost to register.
the
It's
cost of
minimal.
registering, the plat changes, all of that, that was one of the assumptions that that cost would be borne by.
I'm not certain, but it's a minimal cost.
I think we're talking about recording costs.
Okay. All right.
$25, something like that.
All right. Thanks.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay, can we get a motion for a second read?
So moved.
Second.
Okay. Alderman Lockmuller made the motion, second by Alderman Weggie. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carries. Can we get a second read of 6329 by title only, please?
Bill number 6329, an ordinance vacating certain right-of-way owned by the city which is no longer necessary for the purposes for which it was dedicated. Second reading.
Great, thank you. Motion to perfect 6329 into ordinance form?
So moved.
Second.
Great. We're going to say Alderwoman Tice got that one. Any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Alderwoman Tice,
Yes.
Alderwoman Sims,
Yes.
Alderman Weggie,
Yes.
Alderman Gould,
Yes.
Alderman Lockmiller,
Yes.
Alderwoman O'Neill,
Yes.
Alderman Shelton.
Yes.
Okay. Motion to approve the bill. The vote was 7-0. It's perfected into ordinance. The ordinance number will be 4966.
Great, thank you. Next on the agenda is item Bill number 6330. Can we get a first reading by title only, please?
Bill number 6330, an ordinance approving an agreement and license to encroach on easements on property located at 19 Middlesex Drive. First reading.
Great, thank you. Who's handling it, John?
Well, this one is interesting. This is a scenario where a property owner would like to build a garage. It's a garage that would get built across an easement that I think the world has access to. I don't know, MSD, the city, Spire, Ameren, yeah, I don't, the list goes on. Those parties have all agreed to the permitted construction, all in the same fashion that your agreement would, which is, it's at the property owner's risk.
Okay.
Just that simple.
Okay. Any questions on this? Okay, can we get a motion for a second read, please?
So moved. Second.
All right, we got a motion by Alderman Shelton, seconded by Alderman Gould. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carries. Can we get a second read of Bill 6330 by title only, please?
Bill 6330, an ordinance approving an agreement and license to encroach on easements on property located at 19 Middlesex Drive. Second reading.
Great, thank you. And a motion to perfect 6330 into ordinance form.
Second.
Okay, we've got a motion by Alderman Lockmuller. And a second. Any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Alderwoman Tice,
Yes.
Alderwoman Sims,
Yes.
Alderman Weggie,
Yes.
Alderman Gould,
Yes.
Alderman Lockmiller,
Yes.
Alderwoman O'Neill,
Yes.
Alderman Shelton.
Yes.
Motion carries by a vote of 7-0 to perfect bill into ordinance form. Ordinance will be 4967.
Thank you. Bill number 6331, can we get a first read of by title only, please?
Bill number 6331, an ordinance of the City of Brentwood, Missouri, approving a lease agreement with Renatales, Inc., DBA Bowser House, authorizing certain other actions in connection therewith, providing for the effective date of this ordinance and containing a severability clause. First reading.
Thank you. And who's handling this one?
Mark.
Mark. Mr. Murray.
Good evening. This is a bill to authorize the city into a lease agreement with the Bowser House folks. You recall that we purchased that property earlier this year. Bowser House is operating there right now as a month-to-month tenant, and so this would formalize a lease with them through the end of June of next year, which is consistent with the city's timing for that property. So essentially, we are reducing her tenancy to writing and entering into a lease.
Great. Any questions for Mark on that? Okay, can we get a motion for a second read, please?
So moved.
Second.
A motion by Alderwoman Tice, second by Alderman Lockmuller. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Can we get a second read on Bill 6331 by title only, please?
Bill number 6331, an ordinance of the City of Brentwood, Missouri, approving a lease agreement with Renatales, Inc., DBA Bowser House, authorizing certain other actions in connection therewith, providing for the effective date of this ordinance, and containing a severability clause. Second reading.
Great, thank you. And can we get a motion to perfect Bill number 6331 into ordinance form?
So moved.
Second.
Motion made by Alderwoman O'Neill, second by Alderman Gould. Any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Alderwoman Tice.
Yes.
Alderwoman Sims.
Yes.
Alderman Waggy.
Yes.
Alderman Gould.
Yes.
Alderman Lockmiller.
Yes.
Alderwoman O'Neill.
Yes.
Alderwoman Shelton.
Yes.
Vote of 7-0, bill passes. Ordinance will be perfected, ordinance number will be 4968.
Thank you. And finally, Bill number 6332 by title only, please.
Bill number 6332, an ordinance of the City of Brentwood, Missouri approving an amendment to the access easement agreement with GWH LLC, authorizing certain other actions in connection therewith, providing for the effective date of this ordinance, and containing a severability clause. First reading.
Thank you. Mark, are you taking this one?
Okay, this is a bill to amend an easement we entered into with GWH LLC about this time last year. You may recall this granted an easement to GWH for them to drive up and down Lillian Avenue next to our Public Works building, and then use an area behind their southernmost building that was on the property that we condemned at 2740 Bompard Avenue. As we got into the work, we realized that the concrete pad behind the building went further into the property than I think was anticipated. And so the solution to this issue was to keep the easement behind their building at about 35 feet behind the property line, but instead also give them a little bit of easement behind the Public Works building on 2740 Bompard Avenue. So essentially, if you think about this in terms of shape, it went from a backwards capital L to an upside down capital T.
Any questions? All right, can we get a motion for a second read, please?
So moved.
Got a motion by Alderman
Second.
Shelton. Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Mr. City Attorney, can we get a second read on Bill 6332 by title only, please?
Bill number 6332, an ordinance of the City of Brentwood, Missouri approving an amendment to the access easement agreement with GWH LLC, authorizing certain other actions in connection therewith, providing for the effective date of this ordinance, and containing a severability clause. Second reading.
Great, thank you. And can we get a motion to perfect Bill number 6332?
So moved.
Second.
Got a motion by Alderwoman Tice, second by Alderwoman O'Neill. Any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Alderwoman Tice.
Yes.
Alderwoman Sims.
Yes.
Alderman Waggy.
Yes.
Alderman Gould.
Yes.
Alderman Lockmiller.
Yes.
Alderwoman O'Neill.
Yes.
Alderman Shelton.
Yes.
Okay, motion carries by a vote of 7-0 to perfect bill into ordinance form. Ordinance number will be 4969.
Great, thank you. That brings us down to item G, discussion to establish pay classification for emergency medical technicians and paramedics. This was an item that was taken up a little bit last Thursday at the workshop, and the request was to pull this out of ordinances 63, 33, 34, and 35. And so we've got this as a separate item. If the board wants to go ahead and have this, take this up tonight, it's on the agenda, we certainly can. If you wanted to wait till Alderman Plufka returns in July, we can do that as well. But I did not ask to have this removed when we were dealing with the agenda, so I've left it on the agenda. So whatever you all want to do. If you want to take it up, then let's go ahead and do it, and just go ahead and start asking away.
Well, it would seem to make sense to me to take it up with the compensation generally, and when we have everyone here.
Yeah.
But I'm also someone that has talked at length about the subject matter, so I come at it a little differently.
Well, again, it doesn't matter to us one way or the other when you take this up. If you want to do it tonight, that's fine. If you want to wait till July, I guess we just take a motion to table. Is that the tech?
Yes,
Okay.
please.
So.
I did have one.
Okay, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. You have a question.
Were you making a motion on the table, Alderwoman Sims?
I will make a motion to table item, what letter is that? D.
G.
Item G, like God,
Okay.
on the
Okay, do we
agenda.
have a second for the motion to table?
Second.
Okay, so we've got a motion and a second. Do we have any discussion then on that motion to table? Alderman Gould.
I just have one question. We don't need to have this decided before we have final numbers of how philosophies and all that.
Not
Okay.
really, not really.
Then that's all good.
Alderman Waggy, did you have something? No?
No, if it's tabled, I'll ask it next time we talk
Okay,
about it.
okay. No further discussion on that. Can we just do a voice vote on that?
A
then?
voice vote, yes. would
Okay,
be fine.
thank you. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries to table. Item G. We're going to skip over items H, I, and J. Thank you, everybody, which brings us down to Bill number 6336. Can we get a first read of Bill number 6336 by title only, please?
Bill number 6336, an ordinance of the City of Brentwood, Missouri, approving a proposal from Hilliker Corporation for broker's opinion of value, authorizing certain other actions in connection therewith, providing for the effective date of this ordinance, and containing a severability clause. First reading.
Great, thank you. Who's presenting on this? Mark?
Okay, this is a bill to authorize the city to accept a proposal from Hilliker Corporation with respect to brokers' opinions of value. We, Bola and Lisa before she left, and I have spoken with Hilliker about getting what they call a broker's opinion of value. It's similar to an appraisal. It's a little less expensive, and it's a little more market-based in terms of what they see in the market. So they've offered to do that for us. The proposal is attached to the ordinance, and essentially it gives us the opportunity to request these opinions of value at the rate of $1,500 each. So in case there is a strategic buy in the area of Brentwood bound, we could turn to the brokers and ask them as to, is this a reasonable price? Is this something we could proceed with? So that's what this proposal is for before you tonight.
Any questions for Mr. Murray? Okay, can we get a motion for a second read?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, we got a motion by Alderman O'Neill, seconded by Alderman Gould for a second read. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Mr. City Attorney, can we get a second read of Bill 6336 by title only, please?
Bill number 6336, an ordinance of the City of Brentwood, Missouri, approving a proposal from Hilliker Corporation for broker's opinion of value, authorizing certain other actions in connection therewith, providing for the effective date of this ordinance, and containing a severability clause. Second reading.
Great, thank you. Can we get a motion to perfect Bill number 6336 into ordinance form?
So move.
Second.
Motion by Alderman Shelton, seconded by Alderwoman Tice. Any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Alderwoman Tice?
Yes.
Alderwoman Sims?
Yes.
Alderman Weggie? Yes. Alderman Gould?
Yes.
Alderman Lockmiller?
Yes.
Alderwoman O'Neill?
Yes.
Alderman Shelton?
Yes.
Okay. Motion carries by a vote of 7-0 to perfect bill into ordinance form. Ordinance will be 4970.
Great, thank you. And that brings us to the last item under new business, and that is going to be the item that we pulled off the consent agenda, which was item K.
K.
Right, is that resolution 1300, just so we're, what's that?
Did board docs update?
I'm sorry? That is, yes, that's resolution, it's resolution number 1300. Okay. Alderwoman O'Neill.
Okay. Some of these things, these streets really need paving. There's no argument about that. Park Ridge Avenue Alley, though, comes under a different bag of worms. When you look at this doesn't go anywhere. The city's been trying to divest itself of odd alleys and places that they really don't need, that it's been questionable who owns them. And yet we look at this, which is essentially someone's driveway, and it does not go anywhere, and we want to spend money to pave that. I object to that. I don't think taxpayers need to be paving somebody else's driveway. If there were a use for it now, I could see it. The only use I could see would be in the future if we were to be lucky enough to have the church donate some land for parks back there. But at the moment, I don't think we should be spending money to pave something that we really don't use and that doesn't benefit anyone except the adjacent landowners.
Okay, Alderwoman Tice.
I'd like to add to the discussion a little bit. The Public Works Committee evaluated this particular alley going all the way from Mount Calvary Church all the way through the part that we just abandoned to the school earlier in this meeting. And the recommendation was to keep this particular section of the alley because looking long-term, that we didn't see a need to abandon it. So I feel like if we decided that we shouldn't abandon this particular stretch, that we should pave it. It's not in great shape, and it's a street that we're looking at repaving streets all over, and I think we should continue to include that in this bid.
Okay. I made a mistake by not first getting a motion to approve Resolution 1300. So can we get that motion to approve Resolution 1300?
So moved.
Okay. Now we're just going to pretend we had the discussion that we just did. Okay. Is there any further discussion on Resolution 1300? Okay. Roll call, please.
Alderwoman Tice?
Yes.
Alderwoman Sims?
Yes.
Alderman Weggie? Alderman Gould?
Yes.
Alderman Lockmiller? Alderwoman O'Neill?
Yes.
Alderman Shelton?
Yes.
Motion carries by 7-0.
Great, thank you. Okay, and that brings us to the last citizen comment. Anybody in the audience care to address the board? Now is the time to do so. You will be given up to 3 minutes. Or online. Nobody.
No one online.
Okay, great. Well, then that gets us to item 13, and we are making a request to this board to go into closed session pursuant to RSMO 610.021 subsections 1 and 2, legal and real estate. Can we get a motion to go into closed section pursuant to those sections and adjourn therefrom?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, motion was made by Alderwoman Sims, seconded by Alderman Gould. Any discussion? Roll call?
Alderwoman Tice?
Yes.
Alderwoman Sims?
Yes.
Alderman Weggie? Yes. Alderman Gould?
Yes.
Alderman Lockmiller? Yes. Alderwoman O'Neill?
Yes.
Alderman Shelton?
Yes.
Okay. Motion carries by a vote of 7-0.
Great, thank you, everybody. We will